lot of people looked at, myself included, looked at this Bills team going into the season and said, no, look at this roster. Too much is on Josh Allen's plate. And as a matter of fact, it feels about as balanced as the Bills' offense has been in a while, taking the ball out of Josh Allen's hands. Not that he's not the engine that makes it go, but I also think the offensive line and how they have been playing have been a big part of staying as balanced as they have wanted to in the run and the pass wherever the ball is for them on offense. They've got a particularly interesting test here against Steve Spagnuolo and the Kansas City Chiefs defense, which always plays you about as well as you possibly can. The Bills are doing some fun things on offense with maybe those extra offensive linemen that we have seen so far this season. They're grading out well in those situations. But when you look at the Bills, just talk to me about where their offensive line is at and whether that's a reason to continue to believe in this team, or maybe if there's a little cause for concern going up against Kansas City, particularly in this matchup.
No, it's the thing beyond Allen playing unbelievable football that makes me believe that this could be legit this season. And that's why the Chiefs test is so fascinating to me. We've seen them do this before against the Chiefs, where they kind of bring a one-off game plan that's Chiefs-specific during the regular season. They did it a couple of years back with Reggie Gilliam, where out of nowhere they had a fullback on the field like 70% of the time. They used the option run game with the quarterback a bunch more. Well, this year they've kind of been laying the tracks all season long. I think they run the most idiosyncratic offense in the entire NFL. It's probably them. Washington does things completely differently to everyone else because of Jaden Daniels' skill set and the fact he's a rookie. But you hit on some of the extra line stuff. It's not just like a fun, gimmicky, every now and then thing for them with the extra offensive linemen. They are running 6 offensive linemen all the time. It's 18% of their base offense is using an extra offensive lineman, and they do it in such a fun way where they have Deion Dawkins, who's playing really well this season, split so far away from the rest of the formation where he's like on the moon. Then you've got a cluster of 5 guys almost acting as the true offensive line next to him, and you have Dawkins operating almost as like a tight end who would chip someone, right, to get the edge rusher to have a really wide arc if it's a play action shot. And they are just crushing people when they get to this extra set stuff. That there is no one else in the league running anywhere near that volume of extra line plays. The league average this season is 14 if you take the Bills out of it. And when you go through those, almost all of them, at least at the bottom end of the league, is kneel down stuff, it's goal line stuff. For the Bills, this is how they're getting to a lot of their explosive plays, both in the run game and then getting a bunch of deep play action shots out of the extra offensive line stuff too. So I'm fascinated to see if this is kind of something they've been working on, thinking ahead to January football, thinking ahead to playoff football, thinking ahead to having to face the Chiefs. And now we get a chance to go see it, how much they want to do it. There's been weeks this season where they brought that rate down slightly. They did this against the Colts. They only ran it about 6-7 times. But there's been other weeks where they've been in the 20s, where it's like, this is our go-to design for the week where we get big, we get an extra body on the field. They do it with 2 tight ends as well. So you got 6 linemen, 2 tight ends, and I understand that the tight ends are kind of like pseudo receivers as well. But it's a lot of mass support on the field, and it's not really how we've seen Josh Allen when he's been really at the apex of his powers, when he was rolling with Daboll and was first coming along, have that kind of success. Usually with Allen, it's get everyone spread out, give him as many options as possible. He can be the run game for us taking off. He can figure things out for us. And this year, they've kind of synthesized things and said, we are going to smash people with the run game. We're going to get really heavy, and then we'll take shots and make the shots easier for Josh than just having 4 or 5 eligibles out down the field for him at all times. And as you mentioned, the balance has worked tremendously well for them so far this season. And I just can't wait to see if this has been the plan all along to try and get after the Chiefs or not.
Yeah, over the last 4 weeks, this team has a 54.8% impact run block rate. So they're obviously getting after it as a run blocking unit, but also they've only given up 3 sacks over the last 4 weeks, and just a 21.6 pressure percentage total as a team. So they're just playing really well as a unit. We just mentioned, the offensive line with the Rams. Okay, that's a reason, so it's kind of a cause for concern with them. But with the Buffalo Bills, it feels like it's the exact opposite. And from the Chiefs side of things, I think it is very interesting because, I don't have these numbers right in front of me, but I was watching that game against the Broncos, and they're very comfortable putting all sorts of linemen on the defensive line, whether it's simulated pressures, whether it's mug looks, whatever, or even if it's just straight up, hey, we're playing 5 defensive linemen on the field at one time. The Kansas City Chiefs and Steve Spagnuolo are so flexible in what they do. They are prepared to attack you in ways that they feel like they have the advantage or to really neutralize you the most. So it is fascinating that they're going up against a defensive coordinator with a defensive line that is as flexible and as customizable as the Chiefs are, because when the Buffalo Bills go with these jumbo personnels where you're getting multiple offensive linemen on the field, not just heavy with extra tight ends, jumbo personnel getting the extra linemen out there, do the Bills maybe have a trick up their sleeve where, hey, we've been playing this with 6 offensive linemen out here before, but we haven't really shown you what our best plays could be off of this yet, or some trickery, some pulls, some, guys being eligible, whatever it is. And I'm very excited for this matchup specifically. Do you think the Chiefs are a team that is willing to almost like match fire with fire, if you will, where you say like, okay, you're putting 6 on the offensive line. Guess what? We're going to match you immediately with the same thing. We're going to go beef for beef here, and we're not going to be afraid of this. We're not going to try to play it any different way. We're not going to try to, all right, well, we'll be a little bit faster on defense while you're a little bit stronger. It feels like the Chiefs are very willing to do that from what we've seen over the last couple of weeks. Specifically, I saw that even last week against Denver.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to second guess Spags. He's the smartest guy to ever do this. He'll probably have a plan I never dreamt of in my life, and it'll work effectively knowing what he will do. And it's just a really tough bind because, as you mentioned, if you just say, hey, let's go like mono-y-mono, we'll put 5 big guys, we'll reduce off from, they still have, because of the way they use the tight ends, who, as I said, are kind of like pseudo receivers, it then gets you we're in a one-on-one situation with our linebackers on their tight ends. How do we feel about that assignment? And if you don't feel good about it, you just have to naturally make yourself smaller up front, and then they can just pound away with the run game. But you hit on something really interesting about, do they have a trick up their sleeve? What's interesting about what they've done with the 6th lineman this season is usually when you put an extra hat on the field, you're trying to buy a gap as an offense, right? If you get an extra player on there, you basically add an extra gap into the offensive front that you feel really good about in the run game, right? It's not a tight end, it's not a receiver coming down, it's a true lineman, so you feel good about having an extra gap, and you do that so you can run gap scheme runs so that you can seal and pull and move people around, that you can have an extra gap in the quarterback run game as well. And the Bills have done basically none of that when they put an extra lineman on. It is pure get the big guys on the field and we just smash people. That's what we do. We let the backs read it out and then we take play action shots. They haven't really done any of the classic things you would do for why you would put an extra lineman on the field. So I do wonder, have they been holding some of that stuff in reserve? Is there some cool RPO plays at midfield? Is there going to be some kind of cool creative trickery to try and steal 7 points once they get to the plus side of the field? That is what I would be on, like, red alert, 5-alarm fire everywhere for the Chiefs this week, is what do they have saved up that is specifically designed for us? They have not done this stuff all season, and the Bills have really, when they use Josh Allen as a downhill power threat, has been against the Chiefs. That's one thing they go to. Like, it's worth the investment of the downside of doing that because this is the best team in the NFL. So I think we'll see more variety from them in the run game when they get with those big bodies on the field. And I don't know exactly where Spags will figure, okay, how do I match this? If we just go big on big, we can probably solve the problem of just them driving us off the ball. But if they're adding extra gaps in, if they've got more of an option element, if they got the RPO element, then we may be in some trouble. And if we put the big bodies on, then it's Kincaid, it's Knox, it's one-on-one coverage with our linebackers. Do we feel great about that assignment? And then how do you kind of solve that solution? So I think it's kind of the go-to thing in the game. We know the Chiefs have stuttered on offense for much of the season. If the Bills can just relentlessly drive the ball from those big sets and kind of dictate time of possession, dictate the flow of the game, it's going to make things really tricky on the other side for the Chiefs. So I think it's kind of the major go-to factor. Can the Chiefs find a solution to this or not?
I think the linebacker point that you brought up is a really good one, because I'm just looking at now some coverage grades, and coverage is tough for a linebacker anyways, right? It's a lot of tough assignments. I mean, sometimes guys can catch passes and it's in your zone and you could have been there, but coverage is tough as a linebacker. It really is. So you understand why the coverage grades are a little bit lower. It's what makes guys like Fred Warner absolute aliens when they have things like elite coverage grades as a linebacker. But when I'm looking at the Kansas City Chiefs specifically, I want to look at their 3 linebackers, because one of them goes into a little bit of the point that we were talking about. Nick Bolton, 57.6 coverage grade. Drew Tranquil, 45.3 coverage grade this season. And then Leo Chanel has an 82.2 coverage grade, so his coverage grade's a little bit better. He's given up less catches. He's had less coverage reps, but he's given up less catches. He's got a forced incompletion as well. But the interesting part of this is that Leo Chanel, when we talked about, okay, well, if the Bills are going to put an extra offensive lineman on the field, how do you sort of cope with that? Leo Chanel is the way that you cope with that, right? I mean, he's an absolute animal. So he is a linebacker that plays with the strength of a defensive lineman sometimes, where he's absolutely ferocious when he's attacking the line of scrimmage. So when you talk about on the fly needing somebody to match strength for strength when the Bills go a little bit heavier, even when it's just tight ends in the game, you've got to be comfortable and you've got to think that Spags is going to use Chanel more on the line of scrimmage as that versatile player than he would be in coverage. So that leaves those two other linebackers. I think you're okay with them being coverage players, but to me, if you're not totally comfortable with that, I wonder if this is a big versatile multi-safety set game. Like, I wonder if this is a big 3-safety set type of a game for the Kansas City Chiefs, and if that's how they are more comfortable covering the tight ends that might be there in heavy personnel. And even if it's not a jumbo package where we're getting an extra offensive lineman out there, maybe the Bills are just playing 2 tight ends and they're getting both of those guys in Kincaid and Knox out there. Is this a game where Spagnuolo is comfortable playing more safeties or wants to play more safeties, whether you would call one of them necessarily like a slot defender like Jamari Connor obviously is in there, but I think about some of the other safeties they have, like the Jaden Hicks being a rookie and getting him on the field a little bit more if you feel like his size and athleticism, you're more comfortable with that matching up against the tight end. So I think about that because when I think about those linebackers in particular, Chanel is the one that might be grading a little bit better in coverage, but he's the one I think you got to keep close to the line of scrimmage because of how impactful he could be there, even going up against offensive linemen. So do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think this might be a multi-safety set type of a game for the Chiefs, maybe more than we have seen them in previous weeks?
Yeah, I think you nailed it because even with having solid coverage grades or whatnot, the coverage assignment of, okay, we're facing an 8-man box who wants to drive us off the ball. That's all they do. They run duo every time, basically. They're just going to slam into us. The back reads it. The backs are really good at reading this stuff. And if Josh pulls it, he's ripping it. Okay, that's kind of the assignment for this. And they do it 18% of the time. So it's going to happen. Against us, it may be 25% because that's how they want to attack us. The initial step being drive down because we got to play the run, then bail out is a different coverage assignment, as you said, than kind of I'm rolling to the flat and I can read things and I can pick things up on the fly. The way to get after that, as you mentioned, would be, okay, let's just split our defense in 2. We got the front and we got the secondary, and we just play top down. And so the safety, as you mentioned, can kind of fill in late into the run fit if need be. And if we give up 6 yards on that, we're good with it. They can't stay in big sets forever. And at some point, if they pull and try to hit us with a play action shot, at least we have a third safety on the field who's playing down rather than having a linebacker kind of starting up front and then kind of turning to try and find and pick up those crossing routes, which is where they've kind of nuked people doing that. The only downside would be if you go and watch the Seahawks film, that is a really, really rough one. Mike McDonald tried some of this stuff and it was a disaster, right? They just got mauled off the ball. Now the Chiefs made us say, we got better players, we got a better plan, we think we can handle this. But even like the correct way of going about this, they've just played so well, the Bills. The line has been so good at doing this stuff. The play calling's been really well in sync with when to go to the play action shots versus when to just keep driving away with the run game, that it's really difficult to pick up. I think it's as basic as, can our studs just kind of outbeat the scheme? Can Chris Jones just wreck plays one-on-one? Can as you mentioned, can Leo Chenal just wreck a couple of plays one-on-one to force them to get out of this stuff early in the game, make them a drop-back offense? If they're a drop-back offense, we think we got a pretty good chance of kind of disrupting this stuff when they're just kind of in straight drop-back pass protection mode. But it's a really, really difficult assignment. I think the 3-safety set you mentioned is probably the best approach to this, is to get really heavy up front, put 3 safeties on the field, kind of try and buy into both worlds defensively. But they're also, because they've got the 2 tight ends who are really good receivers, it allows them to say, well, we can move out of this. 90% of the time the Bills are in these sets, they are motioning and shifting in some way. So presenting one thing pre-snap and then either bringing the tight ends in or splitting them out. So even if you feel comfortable, like, well, if it's just a big bodied set, we can have the big front, we can have the speed on the back end that we need to play top down. They can move and get out of this stuff, and they give Allen the freedom to kind of pick his spots and do what he wants to do at the line of scrimmage. So it is truly, I think, one of the most underrated aspects of the season, the way the Bills have evolved their offense and what they're doing specifically with those stuff. This is like the ultimate, let's see it then. Let's see it against a really good defensive mind, a really good defensive team you're going to have to go through to try and win the whole damn thing. It's just the most exciting schematic matchup I can think of this season.
I know. It's not a primetime matchup. I kind of wish it would be, so the world would get to watch this one as it unfolds live. But it Bills Chiefs. It's going to be a fantastic schematic matchup against some really good coaching staffs and some really good players. So I'm very excited to get to that. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below, so if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you come one today.